podcasts.
The Profile. You're listening to Premier Christian Radio.
Hello and welcome to The Profile here on Premier Christian Radio with me, Sam Hales. I'm the editor of Premier Christianity magazine. That's the UK's leading Christian publication. And if you would like a free sample copy of our latest issue, you can head to premierchristianity.com/free sample. Simply type your address in and we will send you a free print copy of the latest edition of the magazine. But today, here on The Profile, available as a podcast and also on Premier Christian Radio, it's the show where we delve into a person's life, faith and testimony. And I'm delighted to say that my guest today is the radio DJ, actor and TV presenter, Ortis Deley. Ortis hosts Channel 5's The Gadget Show and was previously a presenter of a host of CBBC shows, including Exchange, Short Change and Live and Kicking. He's also a self-confessed geek with a huge comic collection, an occasional actor, having starred in The Bill, Silent Witness and the cult film Kidulthood. Ortis is also patron of First Touch, a charity supporting babies, families and staff on the neonatal unit at St George's Hospital here in London. Ortis, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
As a presenter of The Gadget Show, do you often get stopped in the street and asked, can you fix my phone?
That's stopped now. I've been part of the show for nearly 10 years. But once upon a time, a lot of people would ask, how do you fix this, or what's wrong with my device kind of thing. Now it's more, I'm going abroad, would really like a compact camera that can do X, Y and Z. Do you have any recommendations?
Really?
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
And it's weird with tech because they're like clothes. It's not a case of one size fits all. What works for me or other members of the show won't necessarily work for everybody else. As someone who has a platform to share their opinion, I think it's always quite key to say this is just my opinion. I'm not speaking on behalf of everybody in tech. I'm not speaking on behalf of every Londoner. I'm not speaking on behalf of every black man. These are my thoughts and these are my experiences.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to ask, actually, do you, because I'm someone who remembers you from CBBC, so I'm a big fan and I have many fond memories of those shows I just reeled off, as I guess almost every millennial does. People in their 20s can remember those CBBC shows you used to front. Do you get recognised for those as much as you get recognised for more of your most recent TV work?
I think it's a pretty even spread. I think I was watched by more millennials when I was doing the job then than I do people who watch some of the shows I do now. You have to remember that when I started in television, there wasn't that much choice in terms of what you could watch. Now we're beyond spoilt for choice. We have umpteen channels, then we have live streaming services, we have video on demand. There's so much now. So at any given time, my audience is a fraction of what it was once upon a time.
I said at the beginning, you have a huge comic collection. Am I right in thinking it's approaching 10,000?
Yeah, it was once upon a time. What I've had to do is go digital. So I only collect 2 titles now physically.
Okay.
But I've got around 8,000 in lockup somewhere.
Wow.
They had to leave the house because I had children.
I was going to say, what was the decision to go digital? Was it having kids?
This room is being converted into a nursery. That's what I was told.
That's what you were told. I was going to say, it sounds like you were told that rather than you made that decision. Was that your wife by any chance?
So they had to shift them. Yeah.
You had to give it up. So what technology are you most excited about? As we head into 2020, as we look into next year, 2020 is this huge year, isn't it? You think, I can remember for a long time now people saying, well, by 2020 such and such will happen, and all of a sudden 2020 is more or less upon us. So what's on the horizon you're excited about?
I think we'll see a lot more stuff to do with 5G. Now the thing with 5G is no one really knows the doors that it will open in terms of businesses, changes in behavior, and what we can do with it. An example I want to share is if you look at Uber, if you look at apps like Just Eat, I'm talking about those things that allow us to order stuff on the move. Before 4G, no one said this is what we'll be doing. 30 years ago, they thought we'd be in flying cars and whatnot by this time. But every 5 or 10 years, something happens which changes our direction in terms of technology and its
kind of
effect on society.
unlocks other things we didn't even imagine.
Exactly.
So what is 5G going to unlock that we can't imagine?
Already sort of earmarked, 5G will open up mobile gaming, for example, will increase the quality at which we can stream our content, will enable things like self-driving cars. That's what we know it will allow us to do in the next 10, 15 years. But there's also stuff we don't know. How is it going to affect our day-to-day movement? How is it going to affect how we engage with each other or engage with our favourite books, our stories, we just don't know those things yet. But what I am excited about is what 5G could bring.
We'll have to wait and see.
We will have to wait and see.
What does the average day look like for you at the moment? Is there an average day?
Not really. I'm freelance, so there is no set day or days in my week where I'm working. So I might only do a Gadget Show shoot one day in the week, or I might be abroad with Gadget Show and I'll be shooting every day of the week. I could be hosting an awards ceremony or a tech festival in the daytime, or I'm at home with my family. It really there's no predicting it.
When you were younger, did you have an idea of what you wanted to do when you grew up?
Yes.
Would it be TV presenter, what you're doing now?
No. If you ask my parents, at one stage I wanted to be a policeman. Another point, I wanted to be a doctor. Then as I got older, I became fascinated with science and technology. Chemical engineering was on the cards for a little while. My parents wanted me to be a doctor, not a hope. I wasn't comfortable with the dead, to be fair. But I was still fascinated by medicine and the effect of certain substances on our bodies, our tissue, and indeed on our brains. So I studied pharmacy and had every intention of going into pharmaceutical research and being part of the team, or perhaps at the forefront of new and huge developments in medicine. But life had
something else
had something else.
We'll come on to the turning point in that in a minute. But here on the profile, we like to go back to the beginning of a person's life, find out about childhood. Understand you grew up in London, so what was that like?
Born and raised in London. I grew up, or we moved around a fair bit. I have strong memories of, and strong positive ones actually, growing up on an estate in Elephant and Castle for a few years. And from Elephant and Castle we moved to Tooting. We moved into a house in Tooting, so we lived on a street and there was a park opposite. And I can remember scuffing my knees, climbing frames, garages, buildings, falling out with friends, and making new friends, cycling. I used to ride my little bikes everywhere, sometimes too far.
How far did you get?
Reasonably far. Probably got about 5, as a 7, 8, 9-year-old, 5 miles away from home on the bike. Dislocating my wrist, age 10, again, further away from home than I should have been.
So you like to be out and about?
Yeah.
Tell me about your parents.
My parents are, my mum is Ghanaian, my dad is Ghanaian Nigerian. They came over to London in 1972, having tried to live in Munich, I believe, for a little while.
Right.
Didn't feel entirely comfortable there, so it was suggested to them that they come over to the UK. Dad was studying to be an accountant. Mum was working for a packaging company. And I happened a year later, so earlier than planned, if planned at all. And so my dad then started working for Royal Mail. I can remember growing up in a safe and happy home, surrounded by my parents' friends, the extended family.
I know you said before you were raised Catholic. So what was your?
So it was a Christian household.
Yeah.
My dad was raised Baptist. My mum
Baptist, right.
was raised Catholic.
Right. Okay.
And their sort of middle ground was Catholic church and Methodist church growing up. I can remember attending both types of church with my parents as I was growing up.
Oh wow! What ages was that?
Young ages. So earliest was probably from about five or six, up until around 11.
What was your experience of God as a child?
That he was there and could do good stuff. As a child, that was pretty much it. This person that we would sing to and talk to in prayer.
Did you find yourself kind of warming to, I guess, either expression of Christianity? It's can be quite different, Methodist and Catholic churches.
As a child, I looked forward on Sunday to meeting up with my friends in Sunday school. So I will confess to not having felt impacted at all by in any real religious sense as a child.
And how have things changed since then in terms of faith and belief?
So I don't attend church. I still feel tied to the values and beliefs that were instilled via church as a child growing up. I do my best to be good to all and mind my temper. I try my best not to judge those who are different to me. And by different, I mean different colour skin, different religious belief, different way of doing things. I try to work my way through life, because I think that's what it is. We're working our way through life. Being as positive as possible and concentrating on trying to raise two well-rounded, stable individuals in my children.
So for your kids, it's quite different to your own upbringing, because obviously in your upbringing you went to church and there was a kind of mum and dad who identified as Catholic and Methodist. Do you kind of identify with any labels in that way? Or?
I would identify, if I had to identify myself, I guess I am a Christian. I believe in a higher power that we don't fully understand. What shape that power is, I don't know.
Yeah.
My wife feels the same. She was raised in a Jewish household.
Really? Right.
So already we have a clash at worst, or a merging of two different cultures. And that's why for us it works best to explain to our children where each of their parents are from, give them as much information as we can, so that they can then make decisions. If they chose to follow a particular faith, we would like to be able to understand why they were doing that, but wouldn't stand in their way.
Yeah. Tell me more about what those values were that you inherited in family, and what those values are that you're then passing on to your kids.
Family is key. That the members of your family are those that you can trust. You will meet people on your journey through life who you can trust as well. But your brother, your mum, your dad, your uncle, your grandparents, your cousins, your immediate family, they're the ones who you will seek immediate strength from. Never forget that. So don't smack her when she snatches a toy from you, this is your cousin, you share the toys. Make time for members of your family as well. You won't know if they are struggling at all if they don't feel comfortable enough to share that with you. So family is top, and also a belief system, something that allows you to, something that you can draw strength from, and something that allows you to be as good a person as possible. A lot of people find that strength in a religious belief, and if my children tell us that that's where they want to go, then so be it.
Have you ever doubted that presence or God or higher power exists? Have there been moments you think, actually, you know what, I think the atheist might have a point here, maybe God isn't there after all?
Yes. There's a lot going on that contradicts my knowledge now, and my knowledge isn't deep, so I guess it's easier to be swayed or to have doubts if your conviction isn't deeply entrenched, and it's the obvious ones, the wars, the famines, the taking of good people or young people, when negative things have no rhyme or reason. That's when the questions come in. And I think I've been around on this planet long enough to know that as a human being, we're fallible, and we are not 100% positive all the time. There are times when we are weak and we need family and or faith to help raise us up or bolster our strength or to reinvigorate us.
It's been fascinating doing these interviews, and I asked that question of everyone who sits in that chair of, had there been moments of doubt? And it doesn't matter whether they're church leader or evangelist, whether they work in pop music, whether they work in entertainment, whether they're a sports star, whether they're the Archbishop of Canterbury, almost everyone says, I have doubts. And some days it just doesn't make sense.
I think it's really important to acknowledge that, and to be able to acknowledge that. I think an unwavering, you can still have an unshakable belief, but I don't know who it is I'm quoting, but to err is to be human. We are not perfect, and so there are going to be times when we feel undermined, when we feel weak, when we feel doubtful, and only a strong belief in a higher power, or other soldiers, members of the family, warriors by your side can help keep you from falling too far or straying too far from the path.
It's interesting talking about how church isn't part of your life at the moment. Sometimes people say church doesn't work for me for whatever reason, but they connect with God in other ways, whether they have spiritual practices like prayer, or even just times of solitude, or fasting. It could be anything. Are there things like that you connect with God more over?
Meditation. So I don't specifically meditate to connect with God, but I do meditate to bring peace within, a calm, and to connect with the universe, and something or perhaps someone out there, and that does bring me peace. It does calm me down. I get quite stressed out sometimes through work, and for me it's the not knowing where the next contract is, or am I working next Tuesday or not, because I've got another engagement that is quite important to me, but I'm promised to this organization first. It can get quite stressful. So meditation works.
When the big questions of life do arise, why am I here, what's going to happen when I die, are there particular places or people you go to with that?
I do have a friend who I talk to about those things. Why I'm here, I believe I'm here to entertain, inform, and to put a smile on people's faces. That's That's why I'm here. And now to raise a family. And then about death, I used to be scared of talking about it. It's inevitable. I think a lot of the fear comes from not knowing what's on the other side. It's a waste of energy to fear the unknown, fear what you know can, hurt you, damage you, and then use that fear in a way to, make you stronger. What's on the other side, I don't know. I may very well be part of that swell of people who become more curious and more religious as they get older. I've seen it happen a lot around me.
Really?
And I guess it's a way of trying to make sense of.
Well, some people say actually when they have kids that can sometimes for some people make them ask those questions again, or can be almost quite a spiritual experience. I don't know if that was your case when you became a dad.
I had a friend. It became marked for me when I had a friend who all of a sudden became very, very frightened of flight after she had her children. And everyone around her thought it was irrational and, made such judgments. And then it occurred to me to just ask her, why is it you think you're afraid of flying? Well, who will look after my babies? She said. Flying, you relinquish control of your journey to somebody else. You're not flying that plane, someone else is. You don't know who's flying that plane. You've never met them before. You've not had a drink with them. You've not broken bread with them, sat next to them in church. You know nothing about them. And you're being asked to trust them 100%.
You're making me afraid of flying, Otis. I was fine before this conversation.
But this was her reason.
Sure, yeah.
And that makes complete sense to me.
Yeah.
So I think I haven't questioned my purpose since the birth of my children, but I do question what planet they'll inherit from us when they grow up. We keep, the children are our future and they're meant to be better versions of us. If that's the case, why do we still appear to be heading in the wrong direction?
Which wrong direction is that?
Planet destruction, the wars still fought, same or similar wars that have been fought for decades, and then in the West, that sort of threat of something big and cataclysmic about to happen. They're all there as much as they ever were. When I talk to parents from the older generation, the fears are somewhat similar. You know.
Yeah. Let's chat a bit about your career. I understand your big break into the world of TV actually came when you were a contestant on the TV show Blind Date.
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
I owe it all to Cilla Black. May she rest in power. I was at university at the time, and towards the end of my second year, we started seeing posters around university saying that London Weekend Television, the production company behind Blind Date, were in town auditioning for Blind Date. And me and a bunch of my fellow students, friends of mine, thought it might be a laugh to,
go on the show.
Have the interview to start with. And we did. It was a fun afternoon. And they got in touch a couple of months later asking if I'd like to take part in the next round of interviews. I was studying in Sunderland, and the next round of interviews were in Edinburgh. I'd never been to Scotland before, so figured, what's the worst that could happen? I did that round of interviews. And then a couple of months after that, actually, I was given a phone call on my 21st birthday. So I was doing nothing for my 21st birthday. I was at home with my mum and dad, just chilling, not doing anything. The phone rang, and they said, "You've made it onto the show. You'll be recording your first episode on the 4th of July. Do you still want to do it?" So I said, yeah, it might be fun. And that's all I went in thinking, that it might be fun. Who knows where I'll end up. If I'm lucky, I might get a snog. And I went on the show, very nervous, actually. And those that know me were like, we didn't even recognise the guy that was on. I was the picker, so was asking all the questions, my own questions, incidentally. And I ended up going with a girl called Sherry to Seattle in the States. 5 days we were out there for.
That's a long way to go for 5 days.
Long way to go for 5 days.
Quite the jet lag on the way back.
Didn't feel any of it. I was just so excited. This was a very different experience for me, and I felt very comfortable with these strangers and their contraptions and stuff, and it showed. And when I returned to the show to talk about the date, being on that sofa with my mate Scylla and the audience just felt like the most natural and comfortable thing in the world. And I think channel heads and producers and whatever who saw that. Right. They saw that you were comfortable on TV, basically. Yeah. And so I was asked to do I was invited to a whole bunch of screen tests and auditions and readings and castings, which was very difficult while I was in my final year at uni. I came down and did a couple, and then wound up working for a small cable and satellite channel, TCC, which then became Trouble. My course leaders weren't happy that I was doing two things. Right. They said, it really should be one or the other. So I worked part-time during my final year to get my degree. What I didn't want to do was drop out. There was no telling how long TV might last or if it would ever take off. Completed my degree and then thought, okay, that degree is safe. No one can take it away from me. It's in my back pocket for 5 years before I have to refresh it. Let's see what happens in television. And 25 years later, I'm still here. So.
You're listening to The Profile here on Premier Christian Radio with me, Sam Hales. You can hear the rest of my conversation with Ortis Deley right after this.
Join me, Justin Briley, for a new season of The Big Conversation with world-class thinkers, including Sir Roger Penrose and William Lane Craig on God and the Universe, Bart Ehrman and Peter J. Williams on Jesus and the Gospels. Join the conversation as we explore life's biggest questions at thebigconversation.show.
Do you want to stay informed on the best of what's happening in the UK church today? Premier Christianity magazine is for you. The UK's leading Christian magazine is published every month and features interviews with Christian leaders, in-depth reporting, reviews, columnists, and loads more. And best of all, you can try it for free. Head to our website now to request the latest edition worth £5.95 completely free of charge.
Visit premierchristianity.com/free sample. The Profile. You're listening to Premier Christian Radio. Where faith comes to life.
A very good afternoon to you and welcome back to The Profile here on Premier Christian Radio with me, Sam Hales. The Profile is brought to you in association with Premier Christianity magazine. That's the magazine that I edit, and if you would like a free copy, we will send you one. Simply go to premierchristianity.com/free sample, and at that link you can request a free copy of the UK's leading Christian magazine. Why not do that now? premierchristianity.com/free sample. But now on The Profile, time to rejoin my conversation with the TV presenter Ortis Deley. Ortis is well known, of course, for his roles in children's TV and more recently for presenting the Gadget Show on Channel 5. Time to rejoin our conversation where I asked him his memories of presenting children's TV. Do you have fond memories of those days?
Absolutely. I say with great pride, actually, that those were days where all I had to do was remember the relevant information, the takeaway, the empowering words about how to deal with X, Y, and Z in a certain situation. Outside of that, Ortis, you do it your way and have fun with it.
Yeah.
So it was honest, it was clean, it was a safe environment for children, and it was fun. So I have very fond memories of my early years at the BBC. Even fonder memories of my time immediately before that at Trouble, because we were pioneering. There wasn't a rule book that we adhered to. We all just did our own thing, and Trouble became a real force among teenagers between 96 and 2003, and I'm really happy that I was a part of that.
Yeah, a huge part of your career, as you say, it was in children's television across those different programs and channels. Did there come a point where you deliberately wanted to make a move away from that?
Yes, absolutely.
And was that because you thought, I can't do kids TV forever?
My thing was it was partly a case of not wanting to, and two, I felt, how long will young children believe me? While I've got a full head of hair and all the energy that goes with it, I could still be considered as a cool older brother. But I had an issue with staying too long and having kids feel, well, I don't want to watch what he does anymore, irrespective of how important the programming was, because I don't believe in him. I don't believe him. And I wanted to move into mainstream television. But it took 5 years from making the decision to actually landing a position outside of
and what was that
children's
first
television.
position?
Gadget Show.
Gadget Show.
Yeah.
Straight into Gadget Show.
Yeah, well, straight in, you say. I mean, it took a while.
How was that adjustment? What were the things that you had to learn in going from one to the other?
I would like to believe that I didn't have to learn anything. So, all my adult life, I've spoken to adults. Mm-hmm. When the camera stopped rolling, I didn't then hang out with kids, because those were the only individuals I was able to talk to. And in fact, when I was broadcasting, I never looked at the audience as children. They were other human beings. And so I didn't speak grown up, but I also didn't speak childish or down to children. So I actually believe it was more about me converting those people I was working with. I had a lot of, when you do your bit to camera, don't do it kiddie. You're talking to adults. And then to me, it's like, well, you're talking to me, and I've got this job because of what I've done. So let me do it as me. And as long as I get the words right and you understand what it is I'm saying, let's call that a victory.
So are you saying people were nervous about you coming in?
Yeah.
And thought you'd be too kiddie, for want of a better term?
Yes.
But actually, that was never going to be an issue?
It was never going to be an issue.
I don't know if you saw recently, Amal Rajan from the BBC did a documentary called How to Break Into the Elite. And it was a very interesting show, really making the case that in certain professions, including our profession, media, it's often a case of who you know rather than what you know. And really the argument that it can be dominated by the middle and upper classes in media. And if you're from a working class background, it can be hard to break into the media. Do you think that's true?
Yes. I think that's true across large corporations and social sets. When you mix with people whose mindset is success, that rubs off on you. When you mix with people who have access, you become part of that. If you don't have access to those things or those people, it becomes not impossible, but more difficult. And the upper echelons have a way of protecting what's theirs and letting very few new people in unless they are family.
It sounds like you might be slightly talking from experience on some of this.
I have friends who are great presenters. Some of them have done really, really well, and some haven't. Right. There is no real distinction between their skill set and how good they are. But one may network incredibly well and just happens to be in the right place at the right time and has left an impression on the minds of the right people. to call them when they need someone to host their show. And I think that is a hugely contributing factor. It's not the only one, but it is a hugely contributing factor. I used to believe that good work begats good work, or begot good work.
Kids are told in school. It's what I was taught. Work hard and it'll work out.
It's not.
It's not true.
I wouldn't say it's not true. It is not the full picture. There can be a lot of shoulder rubbing, ego massaging to be done on the route. There's nothing to say that you can't do it your way, if that's how you're wired and that's what you want to do. But I think it's important to be aware that there are other ways, and there are lots of people out there who aren't great at their job, but because they know the right people, they are in that job and they're not going anywhere.
So how does that work out for you? Because obviously you say you're freelance and you've got some fantastic places you work at the moment, but time might come to move on. You might be looking at the next thing. Do you feel like you then have to play that game of the kind of networking and the shoulder rubbing and building up the contacts in order to progress in your career?
I don't really like playing that game. So when it comes to it, I might be in a bit of trouble. I would like to think that when the opportunity comes to move on, I can show a body of work that is, 25 years long and deep, and engage with similar-minded people to make it happen. There are a couple of things that I'm involved in at the moment, which are which only me and my partners control.
Right.
And yes, there is some networking, but it's a more pleasant way of networking with people who have similar beliefs and similar ideas to you.
You were once asked what was the hardest lesson that you'd had to learn in your career, and you said that continuing to fly by the seat of your pants and winging it will end up biting you on the bum. Which is a great answer, but what made you say that?
The event, I landed a job working for one of the big five, being
one of the big five channels. So.
Big five channels, yes. Sorry, big five channels here in the UK, hosting some athletics coverage. I was ill prepared, as was the production company, and that showed live on air. I lost a job, lost a position, and subsequently was out of television for 2 years. Wow. Couldn't all the networking skills in the world weren't going to save me. I sort of became, I believe, toxic. So no production companies wanted anything to do with me. No channels wanted me to host anything on their shows, and I had to sit it out for 2 years, which was definitely a career low point, was almost a personal low point as well. But I had too many good people around me to let that happen. And also I do think there is an inner strength that I have somewhere that allowed me to rebuild and not let all the bad stuff that was happening get me down too much.
What did you do for the 2 years?
I spent the first year quite bitter as I watched the fruits of my career sort of dwindle, being invited to less things, being asked to host fewer engagements. After a year, I figured there was probably no way back into television, so I started about reinventing myself. I became a personal trainer and was all set to launch new projects around keeping people mentally and physically fit. And then television reached an olive branch back out. So I gingerly re-entered the fray.
And what was that olive branch?
It was Gadget Show again.
Right.
So I was dropped from Gadget Show during that 2 year period. And then I like to think they realised the error of their ways as their audience figures fell through the floor.
Well, I mean, the athletics thing that you were hosting, that was a live studio environment.
But you have to remember that I came up on a live studio environment. Live and Kicking was
but my
3 hours
my
of
theory
live.
being, I'm trying to fight your defense, trying to defend you here, Otis. You know, that was a live studio environment. You had probably someone in your ear. When I've seen you on the Gadget Show, it seems like it's often more of a pre-recorded environment.
Oh, it is. It is a completely pre-recorded
So you could have said to them,
environment.
"Hey, I can still do a Gadget Show. I'm sorry I messed up on the athletics, but that was a completely different environment."
Yeah, I mean, well, pride takes almost centre stage there. I wasn't going to ask anybody for my job back. I wasn't going to beg either. And I was going through... I was looking at bankruptcy. I was looking at losing the family home. There were other things that felt more important than asking for my job back. It sounds weird saying it out loud, because obviously having the job back would have helped combat some of those other things. But bitterness and anger were the strongest emotions at that point. And I wanted very little to do with those I had worked with previously.
It's a really tough time. I was going to ask you what's been the best day of your career and what's been the worst day, but I might have already found out what the worst day was.
That was definitely the worst day. Best days, I think, and best experiences would be the only way to answer that question. What immediately springs to mind, I did a show called T-Spot on Trouble, which was just wild, anarchic fun. It was a live show, half an hour every day, half an hour live magazine show, which I hosted with 3 other presenters who I'm still very much in touch with. It was just great fun. Great fun. Live and Kicking, similarly, was great fun. Live, not as anarchic, a bit safer for the BBC audience. I met everyone and anyone who was a huge star at the turn of the century. Will Smith, Jennifer Lopez. I mean, some of them are still doing things. Beyonce.
And were they all the real deal?
At the time, who knows?
That's a very diplomatic answer.
Who knows? And
sometimes you hear these stories, don't you, about people who meet celebrities, and sometimes it's like that person, nicest person in the world, what a genuine character. And sometimes you hear the horror stories as well, don't you?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the circumstance in which you meet them. You know, a lot of these stars I met on junkets, so they're having interviewer after interviewer after interviewer wheeled in to
for
talk
like
to
5
them.
minutes each, isn't it?
And I think there must be an element of autopilot,
and probably being asked the same question. I mean, I often think this as a journalist, when I go into those sorts of scenarios, I think I don't just ask the same question this poor person's heard 20 times over today.
Yeah, important to me, just to try and get a little something different from them. And then Gadget Show Live, another positive experience. So I think from each decade, I can take 1 or 2 things. Apart from the 2 years I wasn't working, I think my television experience has actually been quite gifted. There have been no real personality clashes with any co-presenters, or I haven't worked with any really awful directors and people. It's been quite a blessed 20 plus years.
I'd love to kind of marry up 2 parts of your career and ask some questions. So I'd love to kind of ask about using your knowledge and your experience of working with young people. I'd love to ask some questions about that, and also bring in the Gadget Show experience of all things technology, because I know some people look at the world today and they'd look at tech and they'd look at kids and they'd have some pretty major concerns. It's interesting actually that here at Premier have another magazine, Youth and Children's Work magazine, and they printed a very bold front cover about a year or so ago. And this magazine goes to youth leaders, goes to people who work with children, goes to parents, goes to anyone working with families. On the front cover of the magazine, they just put the words, "Your children are watching porn."
Yeah.
And so this is where these 2 parts of your career come together. You know a lot about tech, you know a lot about young people. Do you share those sorts of concerns about what are my kids looking at on their iPad, on their iPhone?
Currently, no, because it's easy to police what my 3.5-year-old watches. And we police that by not giving her access to an iPad. unless it's supervised. And she only gets access to the iPad when we're on holiday, and we've loaded up what she can access. When I was growing up, we had access to porn, but it was in paper form. It's not the same, though. What children have access to nowadays is worse.
Yeah.
So as a parent, I know that will be a worry down the line. What do you do? What can I do as a parent to try and offset that or limit its influence and impact? Is engage with my children now, while I am their primary source of everything in their universe. Show them that there are so many wonderful things to be curious about. You can't police your kids all the time.
No,
you can't. I know that as someone who was a kid and was able to, avoid my parents' gaze. I guess for me, it's letting my children know that there is more out there than what is accessible on their device, whether it be romping through the forests and looking at bugs and God's creatures, or trampolining, or riding your bicycle, or playing with friends physically, running around, falling over and laughing so hard until it hurts. As a generally well-rounded individual, that nothing matches that.
Yeah, it's funny. I've got a friend of mine who just knows everything there is to know, it seems, about technology. I'm sure he wouldn't say that, but from my standpoint, this guy's an expert. And he says people often assume that because he's so into his technology, he must just be on his tech all the time. He says the opposite is true. He says he knows the importance of switching off. I know you've spoken about this in your own life, and you mentioned it with your kids as well. There's a whole world out there. And just because you work on the Gadget Show, it doesn't mean that you're all so obsessed by technology that you forget there's a whole other world out there.
I mean, technology is there to help make life easier or increase leisure enjoyment when you want it to. At the end of the day, and this can be a difficult thing to remember, right? I do take stock of that. At the end of the day, all of these devices have an off switch. And there are a myriad ways to control what you're exposed to. Switching off is very important. Limiting access is very important.
It's fascinating that some of the big tech companies have started to understand this. So on my phone, and you couldn't do this until fairly recently, on my phone you can set a time limit, so I can't actually go into any apps after, say, 10 p.m. Or actually on a Sunday I say I don't want to go into any of my apps unless it's, I don't know, the news or the weather or something. And you think it's fascinating that tech companies now building the ability into the phones to help you to use it less.
Yeah, well, because it's ethically correct, isn't it? And I think one thing we've seen from the growth of a lot of these tech companies is the way they engage with their customer base and their staff. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, to go to work and know that there was a fireman's pole and a slide and brightly coloured furniture and bean bags and stuff in the office was unheard of. Flexi time, working from home, all of these things were unheard of. And I think these companies recognize the importance of cracking a whip over people and getting them to work until they can't work anymore, versus providing an environment where productivity is optimized. You do that at work, offer that experience in life as well. Nobody's any good to anybody if all they're doing is looking at a screen.
So what would be your advice to people who perhaps work as youth leaders, people who work as children's leaders in their church? I mean, things have changed, and the world has changed, hasn't it, since you were doing CBBC? I completely admit that. But nevertheless, I imagine you've got some tips or some words of wisdom for Christians today who are working with young people.
my advice would be that technology is there to be used. Well, it's there to be used. It can be weaponized, or it can be used for good. Knowing that balance is where the challenge lies. And it's going to be different for each child or each group of children. And I think as a youth leader and as parents, it's up to you to know the individuals that you're working with and be able to best balance the involvement of technology in there. We all know that if you ban something outright, young minds will find another way, because there is more ingenuity and more untapped capability in those minds and those fingers and those young desires than we could challenge. So figuring out ways to work intelligently with technology is the challenge.
Yeah. Now, you didn't meet your wife on blind date.
I did not.
So how did you meet her?
Randomly. I'd just come out of a very disappointing cinema experience with a very good friend of mine. Late one, I think it was a Monday night. And we've just actually celebrated knowing each other for 20 years.
Oh, amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. And so you might be able to gauge what the disappointing movie was.
Oh, goodness. 20 years ago.
And Rachel was waiting to meet a friend a couple of buildings down from the cinema. And our eyes met. And we struck up a friendship. Not for me, it wasn't. We struck up a friendship and a relationship that lasted a short while, about 8 or 9 months. We parted company on decent terms, and then 6 years later, when she was living in Australia, while she was living in Australia, we met up here for a drink, and it worked out for both of us this time instead of just one. So she moved back, and we've been, building our relationship and our family ever since.
Amazing. How have you found kind of family life, and as you say, building a family, whilst also having your name out there in public and having people write about you? And I'm thinking particularly, I guess, of the difficult experience you had when you were presenting and things went wrong. I mean, that can't have been easy to handle.
No, fortunately for me, I didn't have children at the time, but it's there, it's digital, it's stored if ever they want to access it and ask me questions about it. I think there are no images of them on social media,
and that's very deliberate on your part.
That's very deliberate on my part, or no images of their faces. My wife has perfected the technique of letting people know what they are up to, but you only ever see the back of their head, or a sort of skew profile. Because I believe, even though I believe they're too young to give consent, and obviously as the responsible adult, you give consent. But when they're ready, if social media is still a thing, and they want to share pictures, by all means they can. But I've always kept my family private from what I do, for fear of media taking a liberty or too far. I'm the only one they really need to worry about in or concern themselves with in media. If my wife was in media as well, fine. If my kids become child actors, fine, but that's not the case. So I'm not for sharing.
What's next for your career? What's the next move?
I have a project with two very good friends of mine, which we call Glassmates. and we extol the virtues of becoming drink snobs, basically.
Drink snobs.
So not downing so much alcohol you don't know what day of the week it is, or recognise your own reflection in the mirror.
Always good advice.
Yeah, it's just about becoming more knowledgeable about the dram that's in your glass. So I'm hoping that more and more people get to see more from Glassmates in the coming months and years.
Keep an eye on that one then. Well, Otis, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
I'm Sam Hales. You're listening to Premier Christian Radio. I do hope you enjoyed my conversation with Ortis Deley, the TV presenter. If you want to hear more great interviews like that, why not download The Profile as a podcast? Just search for The Profile wherever you normally get your podcasts from, or go to premierchristianradio.com/The Profile. We've got loads more great interviews coming just for you in the next few weeks. So make sure you join us again, same time, same place, for another great conversation. We'll be back next week. Until then, have a great rest of your weekend.